All right, I've been assigning this article that also has an audio version of it on YouTube by Nguyen called Echo Chambers and Epistemic Bubbles. It's pretty much common knowledge now, I think, that people are worried about media and informational polarization in our society and in our world. And this article picks up on that very topic. So it's kind of it is an essay on what we could call social epistemology. Classical epistemology tends to deal with, the problem of knowledge, the problem of skepticism, how to define knowledge or a justified true belief, how much justification is required for a belief to be rational, and this sort of thing. Social epistemology has to do with the way knowledge is embedded in or has relationships to our social lives, right? Or to social structures. And this article deals with particular epistemic social structures. So obviously we've got in the title epistemic bubbles and echo chambers. So we need to pay particular attention to not only how Nguyen starts out with his basic definitions of these two things, but the specific definitions that he develops in the course of the essay. So just real quickly, the basic distinction is clear enough. An epistemic bubble, bubbles are easy to pop, right, is an epistemic network, a social network, that has inadequate coverage through a process of exclusion by omission. That omission doesn't have to be intentionally evil or malicious, or the exclusion doesn't have to be intentional, but members of that community will not receive all the relevant evidence nor be exposed to a balanced set of arguments. So, every instructor for a gen ed course, for example, has more information that they could talk about than they have time to talk about. So, they have to exclude some things or leave out some things. So that requires making a judgment call. And as a result, if people are working under the presumption that they're going to learn about everything there, then they're clearly going to be missing out on a few things there, but not through malicious intent, just through the practical of necessity, having more information than you could cover at any particular time. The thing about education, right, is that it never ends because there's no way to cover everything, right? So again, an epistemic bubble is an epistemic social network that has inadequate coverage, and that inadequate coverage is a result of omission by exclusion, as Nguyen says. And then on the other hand, we have echo chambers. This is an epistemic community or a social network which creates a significant disparity in trust between members and non-members. This disparity is created by excluding non-members through epistemic discrediting. So while at the same time, simultaneously, it's going to amplify the voices and the epistemic credence given to members. Finally, echo chambers are such that general agreement with some of the core background beliefs is a prerequisite for membership and getting taken seriously by that community, where those core beliefs include beliefs that may support that disparity in trust between members and non-members. So echo chambers are active, or what happens in echo chambers is that they actively discredit, the agents within echo chambers actively discredit non-members out of the gate. It's like they're kind of operating under a poisoning the well fallacy, a preemptive dismissal of any information or sources of information that don't already buy into a large part of that what we might want to call a worldview or these core control beliefs, right? And so while you're reading through this article or listening to the audio of it, pay attention to several things here. The reason Nguyen thinks this is an important issue and why we need to distinguish between these two sorts of social epistemic phenomenon is because of the problem of post-truth. So be sure and pay attention to what he means by post-truth. Obviously, be careful to pay attention to how he describes epistemic bubbles and echo chambers, and in particular, the mechanisms used to create and sustain bubbles and echo chambers. and then how he relates both of those topics to the problem of post-truth. He's going to claim that echo chambers explain post-truth in a way that's more adequate than epistemic bubbles. And so that's why he thinks that distinction is important. And then he's also going to talk a little bit about epistemic responsibility, right? If we're in these social structures, where does the responsibility lie for our continued ignorance? Is it in the social structures, or is it in the agents themselves? Do I have a personal responsibility there, or am I not responsible because of the way the environment has structured my thinking? So there's a question of responsibility there. And then lastly, he's going to follow up by talking about escaping epistemic bubbles and echo chambers. And again, escaping the echo chambers requires something a little bit more radical than escaping an epistemic bubble, where if you're in an epistemic bubble, you just start looking up more, more information and give yourself broader exposure. Echo chambers are different than that. They're going to require what he calls epistemic rebooting. So be sure and pay attention to what he thinks is involved in that process. So with that in mind, be sure and read through, take good notes, and listen carefully to that information.